Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? It's been crazy. Yeah, everybody always asks me, so what's going on with you, Marlene? It's been crazy. And we're going to talk about the crazy part when you find out who my guest is. But anyway, before I get on to that, one, I want to remind you guys to sign up for my newsletter. Okay, it comes out once a week. You could go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com. You can go to my website at MarlenePardo.com. And basically what I do is I just write a short article, weird stories, crime, true crime, anything that's happening, plus links to some of the podcasts. If any of my writing projects is on there. And like I said, it's once a week. And of course, it's interesting stuff. If you're part of my audience, you're going to like it. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to go ahead and speak about my sponsor, Freethinker Projects. Of course, this is a Florida-based company which works with those who need a Florida-based address, whether you're into the nomad lifestyle, the RVers, whatever the case might be, or maybe even now for the holiday seasons, people now are very careful about having things delivered, packages left on their doorstep. They have virtual mailbox service, and they receive your mail and forward it according to what you want, or they will even shred it, whatever you decide. Or if you can even go pick up the packages. They'll hold the packages for you, in other words, if that's what you'd like to do, especially if you think you're going to be ordering a lot of things. They can do that for you. They can go ahead and send the packages. If you're in another part of the country, they can forward those packages or the mail to you. Good thing also, they have online notarization. If you need any type of notarization of paperwork, they can do that online for you. And also, they go ahead and they also offer Florida registered agent services, which means if you need to establish a corporation or any entity like that in the state of Florida, or you already have one, they have very economical plans so that you can comply with what the Florida Division of Corporation requires, that you have an actual physical address in the state. This is not a P.O. box. This is not like a regular mailbox type of place. They don't accept that. The registered agent services that they provide covers you, so you could go ahead and register your corporation. So if and I believe they have plans as far as mail receiving and forwarding, etc., as inexpensive as $9.99 a month. Check them out at it's freethinkerprojects.com, freethinkerprojects with an S at the end.com. Okay, now let's get on to the good part. The good part is the guest I have. This is the first time this gentleman has been on the show, and who we have tonight is Mr. Stan Deyo. He's very well known in circles. God, I've seen him so many times and listened to him on various shows. He's a former Air Force Academy cadet from 1968, former member of Dr. Edward Teller's anti-gravity R&D project in Australia. He's held a top secret security clearance in his work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He claimed to have discovered the original Garden of Eden in 2014 and made a documentary about it in 2018. He also claimed to have discovered Atlantis using new maps data from the Scripps Institute. He's been an amateur archaeologist in the Middle East. He knew the real Indy Jones and explored his digs near the Wadi Haqiqa in the Quran, aka Israel. He's also been a TV documentary television host for several years on Tesla, Eye of the Storm, and a series of 3 highly rated shows on Channel 9 in Perth. UFOs Are Here, UFOs Deyo and You, and UFOs Are Back. He is the author of 3 books and 6 scientific papers. And by the way, you'll see throughout the show that I have gone ahead and included some of the book covers. You know, you'll see them come across the thing. So those are his books. So how are you doing today, Stan?
Doing fine. How are you getting along with all this interference, radio interference with the internet from the sun?
Right. This is okay, guys. This is why I was telling him that I wanted, and I don't know if anybody's had the similar experience. I've never had any problem with my internet service. It's pretty decent. It's pretty good, reliable, I guess. How's that? And I want to say maybe for the last 15 days, when I think about it, or at least 10 days, it's been acting up. It's been acting weird. And I've even called my internet provider and I said, is anything going on? They're like, no. And I was like, well, even my my phone service, it just goes off. It never comes back. It hiccups, but it never recovers from the hiccup. And I was mentioning it to Stan before we started to record. And he brought something to my attention, which I had heard about in the periphery of, but you never relate that to what you're actually experiencing. And Stan, take it away. What seems to be the source of this?
Right now, the sun is in a very unstable state. This is the 25th solar sunspot cycle, which runs about 11.8 years on the average cycle. So we're a couple of years into this one. And I've been predicting for some time that this, even though we're going to have low sunspot count for this season, we're going to have some rather exotic coronal mass ejections and flares from the sun aimed at the Earth. Now, they usually just come out all around the sun somewhere. And as you can see in the video that we've got up there from Solar Dynamics Observatory at NASA, this is showing in the last, this would be the last 62 hours, I think, but because we're, well, no, actually, this is the last 48 hours. You're on the live link there.
Yeah, this is a live link.
Okay, look at the top of the screen in the middle there, and you'll see as it plays that bright spot that will, make a large splash across the entire sun as it erupts and throws out this coronal mass ejection. Now, that puts out charged particles at, you're like sometimes 2 million miles an hour and stuff like that, aimed at the Earth. And when these hit our magnetic field, it produces the kind of hot spots of interruption of, interference to radio waves and stuff all over the planet. And certainly on the Earth-facing side, it's more dynamic than others.
Okay. So let me ask you, and I'm going to start to interrupt you. When you said that this cycle is what, an 11-year reoccurrence? Is that what you're saying?
11.8 reoccurrence, yeah. The sun goes through highs and lows of the number of sunspots appearing on both, the north and south hemisphere. And these are called solar sunspot cycles. And we've got records of that back to, probably the mid 1600s onwards. Okay,
I'm curious, when obviously back in these time periods, there was no technology, let's say that would be affected like now. What were the observers noticing back then? What was the effect?
Well, they learned how to image the sun through a telescope onto a piece of white paper or card.
Okay.
And they could then magnify that image, by the telescope and with other lenses, and they could see these black spots on the surface of the sun. So they started recording them. And this is how we were able to correlate weather to sunspot activity. And that's what's called the Maunder minimum back in that time. In the 1600s, late 1600s, it froze over the River Thames for 2 or 3 years.
Right. I was going to say that was that part of the mini ice age that they refer to.
Might be. Yeah, it might be. I mean, it was so
right
brutal.
That there was like this period, like you said, that the Thames froze over. It was kind of unusually, well, not normal, I guess.
No, shopkeepers put up their shops up there and were selling stuff on top of the Thames River. I mean, it was really thick ice. So, yeah. And then, back in 1859, we had what's called the Carrington Event, when the sun emitted a coronal mass ejection, these charged particles, straight at the Earth. And they call that a halo coronal mass ejection because it forms a circular halo, comes right at us like a big smoke ring of charged particles. And it was so brutal that it created high voltage on the telegraph lines across the United States, because that was high tech at the time. And it caused the fingers of many of the telegraph operators to catch fire and burn from the voltage that it dropped on them. And there were fires started. Well, along the track, the railway tracks where the telegraph lines ran, the voltage got so high it jumped over into the fields and stuff and caught fields on fire next to the railroad track. Now, that was 1859, right? And that was, this happens about every 150 to 200 years. We have a large coronal mass ejection like this. Well, we're overdue for that now. And it was so large that it's a yardstick for what is going to happen, except for this. We have electronics all over the planet and in orbit around the planet. This is going to affect everything. It's going to make fires everywhere. I mean, this is a huge situation, which is why we're monitoring it so closely. My partner, Tim, and I, several years back, invented what's called an EMP shield to protect electronics from the sun. Now, this is going to last several hours when it hits us. When it does happen, it'll fry the planet for several hours. So anyway,
when you say fry, we're talking like all electronics, or?
Well, both the electronics and the electrical grid system, which we've become very dependent upon.
Right.
They'll overload with voltages up to 50,000 volts per square meter. And this is the way they measure that anyway for the EMP, electromagnetic pulse. And this is going to cause arcs all across our, the flyover country where we've got the farms and, wheat crops. It's going to catch fire. And it's the whole United States will have places where it will arc over and start fires in neighborhoods, even in your house, in your breaker box.
I was going to say, basically, it feeds back through electrical lines.
Yeah. I mean, it's mighty. We've never been at this stage of technology before, to my knowledge, anyway, on the planet. And for something like this to happen, is going to cripple the entire planet.
Because I'm thinking this sounds like something that to repair the damage is going to take a while. At least that's what it sounds like.
It's going to cause a rearrangement of the world order. It'll be from those countries who are not so highly dependent on electronics, high tech, to be stronger, trade-wise, than those of us who are totally dependent on electricity, electromagnetism, and all that kind of stuff. We'll suddenly become low on the totem pole if we even survive it.
Yes.
It's terrible.
Yes. And I was born and raised in Miami, so I've gone through, how can I say, hurricanes where everything is gone, and it's nothing like what you're talking about. And even then you realize how dependent we are in our modern society on what we take for granted, as in electricity in the home, electricity outside, your traffic signs, everything. When all of that is gone. And I even was living down in South Florida where Andrew came through in 92, that it just, and people don't realize. And even then, that was just a little part of South Florida. When I imagine that when you're talking the entire United States, in other words, there's no cavalry to come and rescue anybody because everybody's in trouble.
Look, Marlene, like with the hurricanes, people go buy, cases of bottled water and stuff.
Yeah.
When this hits our electric, grid network, it's going to stop power to water pumps that pump water to your house and business. It's going to stop gasoline pumps that put gas in your car. It's going to stop all your security systems that you've got on houses and business. It's going to hit hospitals and people on ventilators, and oxygen. The interference is still going.
I'm telling you, and this is not normal. I'm telling everybody. I've been out of this area for over about a year, and I'm not kidding. This last 10 days has been crazy. And I was like, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I spoke to my internet provider, and I said, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, everything is fine." I'm like, But anyway, let me try this again. After Hurricane Andrew in 92, they made the gas stations put in generators because exactly of what you described, where without electricity, gas stations can't pump gas. The ones that were operating, of course, even though in 92, the use of cellular phones were not that widespread. All right. Thank God that Marlene is going to do her editing magic.
Yeah.
But anyway, to reinforce a point that you were making, Stan, a lot of times we forget what you're describing will be gone for long lengths of time. What that will do to our daily lives across the board, to everybody,
Well, yeah,
in other words, I want to say there's no, or now they have different, if you have, let's say, an emergency in one part of the country, people ship in their help or whatever they need. Everybody will be in the same boat.
Well, you know what? If we blow any of our main transformers that supply power to cities, on the grid, if you blow one of those, and we've got hundreds of them out there, if you blow one of those, it takes 2 to 3 years to have China rebuild it and sell it to us.
Oh my God, yeah.
How crazy is that? I mean,
well, the chip, right now we're suffering through a chip shortage, and that's what stopped the production of automakers using the U.S. plants. But what we're talking here is much worse as far as even fixing the problem to begin with.
Well, we get 93% of the world's chips, high grade chips are made in Taiwan. China supplies a lot of the others. And of course, we use these chips from China and Taiwan in our military devices as well as, civilian use. So we're totally at the mercy of the chip suppliers, wherever they are. And
that's a scary thought.
And China is breathing down the neck of Taiwan to take it over.
Yes.
And if that happens, I guarantee you, if we have a war between China and Russia and us, we'll lose real quick.
I bet. It's almost without just because they cut us off.
Yeah. And I wonder, with all the chips we have purchased in the past and have in our, especially in our military, subs and aircraft and missiles and that kind of stuff, how many of these can be shut off with a command from China that we don't even know about that's in the chips?
Well, when was it? 2017, when we had a hurricane? I think it was Maria or Irma. It was Maria that came up through the state. I don't know if you remember the story that a lot of people with electrical cars, and I want to say they were Teslas, but I'm not positive. I don't remember. They found out that the manufacturer went ahead and did something with the chip in the car that let them go further than they originally thought. And all these car owners were like, what do you mean? In other words, the manufacturer had a remote way of affecting how far that electrical car could go.
Wow. Yeah, that is spooky. Yeah.
When people are trying to leave the state, people that were leaving Florida, like, hey, I'm just going to leave and come back after it's over.
Right.
And all of a sudden they said, the manufacturer said, we did something like equivalent, I guess, to what, when you do a download of an update or whatever, let's say, and to extend the distance that the car could go on, I guess, on a full charge or whatever. Yeah. And this was like news to the owners.
Yeah, they could override that and let the battery discharge further than normal. They have a safety limit that they set, at the factory, but they could override that. And, we've seen television shows based on remote control of your vehicle by other people. Yes. So, yeah.
Yes. And which is along the lines of what you're describing, that maybe we're going to find out the hard way. Maybe, like you said, something that was being used for years or was implemented years before.
Well, let me tell you this. My company, we make the EMP shield over in Kansas at our factory there. And Tim and I, were told by the government, because we deal directly with the Defense Department and Homeland Security and the CIA, but they told us, don't let any of your parts that you need to build the shield for us come from non-American sources. Don't depend on China and all that kind of stuff. And so, a couple of years back, we made sure that everything was clean, made in the United States or in our territories for that reason. I
was going to say, is there anybody left in the United States that does this stuff? I hate to say it. Well, it sounds like they're all gone.
Well, we've got one or two down the south and offshore one as well. But, you can only prepare so much. And after that, you're at the mercy of, fate.
Well, it's going to be really, I know it sounds very dystopian. Like you see this is something I see in the movies, but what you're describing, it could go from just bad to really, really bad, horrible, as a matter of fact. And then when it's going to be, it's some people, it's going to be very horrible if they're dependent on technology, which all of us are, but some people more than others.
Right. It's a good time for people. I mean, it's a bit late in the game, but it's a good time for people to get auxiliary solar power for their homes or their trailer. and wind power, perhaps,
Mhm.
or backup diesel and gasoline generators, which will only last until you have enough gas or gasoline or diesel to run it. But yeah, this is essential. Energy drives the entire universe. Energy, everything.
Well, what was it, yesterday or the day before? It just so happened I heard, because I'm always listening to different shows. I'm multitasking, listening, hearing, reading. There was a lady who commented that she was trying to get solar panels installed. In other words, and the manufacturer, the installer, said, "Look, I cannot fulfill this order because I'm missing a chip or a part that's necessary to install this for you."
Yep.
So even for somebody that's, let's say, trying to do exactly what you're describing, hey, I'm going to start getting some solar panels installed, you might find you might have a problem, because even now, how's that? Even now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I took my Toyota, which is an older car, into the dealer to get, a monthly or 6 monthly service, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a couple of weeks back. And while I was standing there talking to the technician, I said, "Hey, how's your used car market doing? Are your new and used car market both?" He said, "Well, new cars, we're having a problem because we can't get chips, and they're just sitting out there in the yard because they can't ship them without the chips to run the computer in the car." And I said, "Well, how's your secondhand market, used cars, doing?" He says, he says, "It's just like an auction. And, they come in, and not just one person, but a bunch wanting an old car, and they will bid and outbid each other. I mean, we're getting more for our used cars than we do for our new cars because they work."
Yes,
That's just
yes.
incredible.
I've heard up here in North Florida, there's where they have the auctions for the cars, when, insurance, all the cars, they take them out there.
Yeah.
And I have people that I know that usually would go to these auctions to buy these cars that they take to these small dealerships, like used car dealerships. They're gone. They say that when you go to these auctions, you see the bidders fighting over on these used car lots. It's like a minor war, because everybody's trying to get a hold of these used cars.
Well, you're hearing more than I am about that. I didn't realize, how bad it was across the country. I guess I was being myopic here, but that does hit the whole, world economy.
Right. And it's like, how can I tell you? It's almost like the fringes. I mean, obviously everybody's hearing about, what we see with these boats, these ships that are anchored out of Long Beach.
Offshore. Yeah.
Offshore. And, we hear all of this, and it's almost like the periphery of what's going on. But then you start encountering it here and there in real life.
Yeah.
And then what you're, and as you get further along, unless something, I don't know, drastic happens, you could see that this is going to affect us more and more and more until
somebody's playing a massive chess game, worldwide, but particularly focused on the United States. I truly suspect that the Chinese and the Russians both have artificial intelligence computers. The Chinese just announced they had a quantum computer that was really, really fast with artificial intelligence.
Right.
And that means it's a computer playing chess saying, do I hit their energy supplies now, or do I wait, 2 days and then hit their economy another way? And you can see these things happening, and you can't beat it because it is happening so fast. This computer does quadrillion computers, seconds of stuff just before you blink your eye. And they're so massive now, they can track every human being and everything you're doing with all the feeds they get of every human being on Earth real time. Yes. And that's massive power. Yes. And that's what's attacking us right now, is at the hands of our enemies.
Stan, do you think that is there, I've heard of also the shifting of the magnetic poles. Do you think that's actually happening, or is this somebody tweaking stuff? It's actually happening.
That takes a lot of energy, and it is happening. It is part of the realigning of our magnetic poles to where they used to be. In about 2345 BC, according to our calculations here in the lab, there was a large meteor that hit the Earth over on the southeast coast of India. And it was a very shallow angle, about 34 degrees, I think, something like that. And it shoved the whole crust of the Earth into a new position. And you can see the path that the magnetic North Pole made. If you look at Google Earth and go up to the North Pole, where it is now, you'll see a cut, like a jagged tear, from there up to where the North Pole should be. And it's gradually trying to return to that position. And at the same time, it's trying to reverse, to flip-flop, which is rather interesting.
Right. I heard something that every 5 years is when they put out, like, basically a map, as far as for the GPS use. But they've had to give it out sooner because it's changed. The GPS locators have shifted because of of these changes in the magnetic, because GPS uses the magnetic fields, basically to guide it. So, and
well, not only that, the airports, Florida in particular, on the East Coast they've been having to redraw runways to adjust to the new magnetic north. They've had to repaint them. So, yeah.
Let me ask you that this thing with the sun, I just thought of this. Would it affect also all these satellites that we've got orbiting? Are they going to go down too?
Some of them, they have hardened a number of them because they knew that they would be encountering, shock waves from the solar wind, the plasma wind from the sun. Some that were not protected well enough are aging, may have internal shorting and come down. Right. Start looking for big shooting stars, I guess.
And hopefully it won't land in your yard or on your house.
Well, fortunately, most of them are small enough that they'll burn up before they hit the ground.
They'll burn up in the atmosphere, but still. No, I'm thinking from the practical point of view that there's so many things that are tied, again, also into these satellites sometimes, depending on what they were put up there for.
Yeah. One of the things, the new generation of kids that we have now, then, if you tell them, look at a paper map to see where you're going, they'll get this blank look on their face.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Believe it or not, when I want to say a year ago, I went and I bought, those atlases, the ones that come in a book.
Yeah.
Bought one. And I'm not kidding. I use a GPS on my phone when I need to, but I remember once upon a time, maps were the way to go. This is what you used, Yeah.
You learn to read maps.
Learn to read maps. Exactly.
And it's not difficult, but it's just not thought of. I mean, yeah. And people are going to have to go back to that point when the EMP pulses that are coming either from, bombs by our enemies blasting them up overhead to kill our magnetic, to kill our electronics, or from the sun. Yeah. A nuclear pulse. Sorry, go on.
Do you think, Sam, that this is the solar flares, that this is inevitable, or that it might happen, or what do you think are the possibilities of that? I mean, this is besides all the other things that is going on in our world. But this sounds like a really the worst case scenario.
It will happen, and it will happen probably in the next 10 years. And because we're seeing these changes in the sun, in what's called the nuclear equation for the sun, how it works. And in 1997, I think it was, out here in Arizona, the heliospheric lab there determined that there were 2 new ultraviolet frequencies coming out of the sun. And you think, well, yawn, okay, big deal. But what it was saying is that the nuclear chemistry, the equation, was changing, and it was doing what we didn't expect. We thought the sun would keep continuing like it has been for yonks. Now, it has gotten worse since then. There have been other spurious signals coming from the sun. Now, even the Bible, in the book of Revelation and in the Old Testament, have talked about the sun emitting a cloud around it and dimming the light from the sun and making things kind of orange-red, out in the solar system because of the light being diminished. And this cloud gets blown away, and then we have a tremendous burst of high energy, 7 times brighter than the sun now, hit the planet. And 1/3 of our planet, according to the biblical prophecies, will be burned. The fish will die in the sea, the green earth, green trees, everything will catch fire in that one burst. And the reason they say 1/3 of the planet is because it's quick. I mean, 1/3 of the planet at any point in time facing the sun, it's the direct radiation hits about 1/3 of the surface area. And so that's another reason, I think, because I see all the other signs in the prophecies about what's happening with our world, that this falls into line scientifically, what we're seeing in the sun's bad behavior. It's spooky.
Yes. I'm thinking, my mind is just going in, and I know I consider myself an optimist, but it is what it is. It's almost like you said, even I imagine parts of the world or cultures which are less dependent on technology are going to fare better in the sense that they're surviving without the use of all the technology that makes life much easier for us. But when it goes away right away, like all of a sudden.
Well, look at toilet paper. That wasn't short supply. It'll go again. In India and some in Africa and stuff like that, they use a small amount of water or leaves or whatever and wash themselves, and that's it. They laugh at us for being dependent on paper, which chews up a lot of trees. But anyway,
Yes.
Yeah, that simple little thing nearly threw us into chaos. Toilet paper.
Exactly. Yes. God, if anybody that was the year of. I know there was a lot of great memes about that, but yeah, it's incredible what we put up there at the peak of importance of things that you
Well,
must have.
yeah, around our house, because we deal in preparing for emergencies, we even discussed how to get disposable rubber gloves or ones that you wash in a little pan of water and do just like you do in India and wash yourself.
Yeah.
How to do it. The backup plan, but most
Yeah.
people don't have a backup plan.
No, I've got I put in for what it's worth. We have a generator, one that's with propane,
Right.
and plus I also have a well that's hand pumped.
Well,
That I don't need any electricity to pump water out.
Excellent.
Because yes, when you because I've lived where the water coming in is fueled by electricity, and when that goes, guess what? Not only do you not have electricity, you have no water.
Absolutely. And people don't realize how important that is.
Yes, exactly.
When I was over in Tanzania, 2018, I believe it was, when I went over, up in the Ngoro Plateau, I met with a lot of the Maasai and the Datoga tribes and things to see how they dealt with water every day. And they would take the young women, that was their duty, was to take, if they had burros, to take it with them with containers and go to the nearest, spring and load up these containers, which are usually about 5 gallons each. The girls could carry maybe 1 or 2 of those, back home. And they might have to travel an average of 2 or 3 miles to and from the water source. And that was their job, just to get that many gallons of water to the family. And you got to cook and you got to wash with that, and you got to drink it for water. And the average person needs a gallon to a gallon and a half of water a day. So it starts to get very difficult. I mean, while I was over there, even we had bottled water because there were vendors for bottled water all over the place. And it was like gold over there.
I believe it. People don't understand the importance of water, for animals, for plants, for us. And if all of a sudden, and here we're talking, of course, an urban setting, especially where, if something like that happens, all of that's going to get impacted as well. That, hey, you can't turn on the faucet, there's no water. Yeah. And of course, all the stores will be closed.
Yeah. In fact, that's we're going to approach that point pretty quick anyway, because of the drought and because of lack of supplies, because of those 40 to 45 ships that are off our west coast. They can't get in with their load, their cargo, to get dispersed throughout the United States. I mean, the smaller mom and pop grocery stores are probably really hurting and closing up now already.
Yes. I want to ask you. Now that you mentioned that, what do you think, Stan, is really causing these ships not coming in, or not being able to dock and disperse their goods?
It's bad management here in the country. I mean, when you're paying people to stay at home and not work, which the government is doing at the moment, there's no incentive to go work. So you don't have workers, qualified workers, which they had before they went home and stayed home because they were getting paid. This is the first part of it. And when you interrupt the chain like that, it has a domino effect everywhere. And you don't just turn on the spigot and say, okay, we're not going to pay you anymore, go back to work. It doesn't happen that way. It takes months to get everything back up to try to get the goods delivered to where they're supposed to be. We've got a very bad end of year coming, very bad.
And the reason why I asked you that is, and maybe I'm thinking, you're thinking these are major corporations that supposedly, you would think have some type of department that forecasts this, where they could say, okay, you know what? Even though maybe Long Beach is the closest one, let's say if they're coming in from Asia, okay, maybe we need to send this ship to another port to get this in there. And it seems like nobody's doing that.
Well, what DeSantis said, didn't you say you'd send your ships over to Florida? Smart move. But understand that the United States is under attack. This has been in the making for 60 years at least. And the Soviets started, the Chinese got on board as they got more industrialized. And what they've done is form a plan to attack the castle of the United States and starve us out. We're going to kill each other in civil war here shortly. And while we're doing that, Russia and China are going to come in, take out our electronics, EMP pulse bombs, troops on the ground in both ports. we're so eager to get ships into the West Coast that any of these sea containers could come out with tanks in them and just roll them out, and we're done.
Right.
So,
and I have heard of that. I've heard of that theory as, and I guess when you've been alive for a little bit longer, when you lived where I want to say maybe in the last, 40 years, all this onslaught, like I tell everybody, I lived in a house where you had one landline. That was fine. And you didn't suffer for it,
Yeah.
You had an AC in the room when you went to bed, and you used the fan, and like you didn't feel. I went to school, there was no AC, we just had windows open.
Right.
I didn't feel deprived, is what I'm saying. And then of course, we came in with, of course, the pagers and the telephones, and then it took off from there, and then internet, computers, et cetera, et cetera. And I know a lot of people find it difficult, that life without these things, but it does occur, and you don't feel like. I never felt like, oh, I'm missing out. I lived in a major city, and I just think that I have seen, though, what you're describing, as far as, even though it might look like something recent that's occurring, as far as what's impacting us, the economy of the country and a lot of other things. I think I agree with you totally that that's been done very slowly and insidiously.
In the late 50s, my father and his brothers and their families, and myself, I was old enough to help. We started trying to alert people to what was happening in our education of our seminaries being infiltrated to make God is dead, to into the educational system, which is, the next generation, which they were training with bad information. And we've been trying to warn people, publishing books, making lectures. And, for a while you might get 1 million people on board saying, yeah, okay, you're right, we ought to do something. And then they go back to sleep. It's too big a problem, And now that we're faced with a problem where we cannot, through the normal electoral process, change the government the way we need it. We've got 15 months more of this insanity in the White House, and it's illegal, managing of our country. And in that time, the only way to make change is going to be by force. And this is going to create the civil war that we don't want. I mean, that's why President Trump has held back. Look, at our factory, his number one guy that used to be the head of, acting head of ICE, has set up and they even advertise our product, and he and Trump have meetings, lunch every now and then together, the families. So I'm telling you that this is part of the reasoning is they had to hold back, because until, say, like 70% of the population, no matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, but where 70% of the popular opinion said, we have to get rid of these guys, they're attacking the United States, they're treasonous. Until that happens, you can't dare make a move, because you'll just tear the country apart. You're still going to have, problems if you do it at that point, but we're very close to the point where something has to be done.
Right. I know. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And if you're a sane person, that excludes the ones that are not, which unfortunately there's more of them than we thought. You
can't fix stupid either.
No. Well, okay. Yeah, I'm being nice. I'm gonna put that in the mental illness or insane or whatever you want to call it, psychopathic.
Right.
Tab, whatever. I think that us normal in the sense that, hey, we're not into destruction, we're into creation. We have, everybody is live and let live. I want to say, for lack of a better word, because I tell everybody, I remember where you would, whatever your political beliefs were, whatever religious, everybody was live and let live. You would never, ever disturb. If one of your neighbors had any type of political sign on their yard, you would never hear of anybody absolutely touching that. That was like, hey, this was America. Yeah. Everybody's entitled to have whatever. And it was fine. And it was like, this is the United States I know.
Right.
And I think I'm not alone. And I think that's why a lot of us are going, huh? I tell everybody, if anybody would have told me back in December of 2019 what was going to come out in the next 18 months, I would have said, no, that's not going to happen. Are you crazy? No.
I know.
Yeah, right. Talk about a wake up
call. Even
here
in our neighborhood, they were driving around with trucks and guys jumping out and stealing your signs.
That's what I'm saying. I've never. To me, I remember looking at these stories and I'm thinking, that's unrecognizable. What is that? What is that? And that was the norm. How's that? This is the norm of how I grew up in, as far as respect for your other citizens that you live with, even if you didn't like them, even if you didn't agree with them, whatever the case might be. And I want to say that belief bound Americans together. And now I think that a lot of people are, I think that they're getting over the shock of it. And I agree with you that this is even though it looks recent, it's been, how can I say, a setup for a long time.
Education is the main thing.
Yes.
When you put that into the children that become young adults and then middle-aged and they have their children, if you've programmed them for this socialist takeover, they're going to be easy, fair prey. And that's where we are now.
I tell everybody, I went through 12 years of Catholic school, 1 through 12. And then, I went to a local college right out when I graduated. And I remember this was 1978. I want to date myself. And I remember I was sitting in one class. I cannot remember. I think it was either a civics class or something, one of these requirements. The professor, and I'm listening to him, and I'm Cuban American. My family's Cuban. So this gives you, I'm listening to him. He says something, the great Trotsky. And I remember I was writing this. This is the time that you would write your notes. I was like, the great Trotsky.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this is 78.
Right.
And this is a local community college. We're not talking.
And he was serious. Like he was great.
Yes. Like is in serious. The great. And he was making some point. I forgot the point he was trying to make, but I do remember that he's in the great Trotsky. And I remember looking up like I looked at him like, what is he really mean it? And I remember I was like, huh? And I was like, oh. And this was many, many, many years ago.
And now then, of course, when we get the thing that happened in the Virginia election where they're saying, look, you're not allowed to tell us what to teach your children. I'm thinking, oh, boy, are you behind the times?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And this is my point being that even though now it's gotten more exposure, if you want to call it that, it's been happening, but at a very I don't want to say underground, but under the surface, it's been happening. It's been happening. And I'm going to say for one of my last jobs, I was an investigator for the state, and I'm not going to say which department, but I saw it in a lot of the way things were handled. That I was like, okay, that's weird. It's things that this doesn't sound right, but when you're doing a job, you have to do the job. All right. But there's a part of you that this is not right. This is like, a lot of things. And this was maybe last time around, maybe 8 years ago, something like that. So some of these things that have been occurring we've always been swirling in different parts of and like everybody says now, it's in the governments, in the universities, in the entertainment industries.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say because I'm a Catholic, I'm not the most ardent Catholic, but I grew up with this Pope. It's like, what is this, Jesuit? When we get back to what we're talking about, what you were saying as far as what's happening with Jesuits and what their agenda has been.
Yeah.
It's very, I look at that and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we know. I knew that from the beginning. Even when he was named as a pope, he was very welcome by the, I remember when he came in, he visited the United States. All the major news channels were like plotting him because he came in instead of a big car, this little car. And I was like, usually they don't pay this much attention when the Pope visits. Like, what is this? And,
well, remember there's prophecies in the church. The last Pope would betray the flock. And we're there now, I think.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people feel betrayed. I'll tell you that much. Look at him. So. And let me, I'm going to segue off a little bit because I know that you've done looked into the field or worked in that field of Atlantis.
Right.
Okay. Do you think that what happened to Atlantis has anything similar to what we might go through?
Do you mean the destruction of it or the way it was?
Yeah, organized? The destruction, whether it was technology or an event like this, maybe harsher.
I've studied a lot about Atlantis and what we can find in the writings of Plato and some other, adjacent type writings in that period. And apparently they coded their streets with orichalcum metal, and they made eating utensils, plates, and forks and stuff out of this orichalcum, which has a high content of red lead in it, which would have driven them crazy over a period of
Yes.
time. The destruction of Atlantis, there's kind of this lost part of that at the end of the Plato documents. The gods decided to punish Atlanteans from inside the earth. Well, my research has shown that Atlantis is the Saudi peninsula. It used to be separated from Europe by a waterway over in Turkey, and of course the Suez area there as well. But it was an island, and it was destroyed by the impact of a large meteor that caused the Great Flood in the Bible. And this impacted at 2345 BC, as close as we can calculate. And it caused the Saudi plate, like if this is the Mediterranean, this is the Indian Ocean, it caused that part of the Saudi plate to drop down and to raise it up over here about 1,650 feet. We've been able to look at the watermarks over in the mountains over in Turkey. And it buried this part here in a lot of sand and stuff. And so when I was doing my research, I did find, oil reports that they couldn't understand where the meteor was that caused this, but they knew that the meteor had hit the Indian Ocean somewhere and had thrown a backwash up covering Oman, which was in this part of Saudi Arabia, was 2 miles deep of ocean bottom. And that had hit the thin crust of the planet so hard that it caused the crust to split, to move and to start expanding. The whole planet started to expand from this impact. And in the Chinese and Egyptian, astronomical records, they show that the sun used to rise in the west twice in recorded history. And that was because of the crust being in a different position. Now, you could move the crust of the Earth without as much energy as you'd have to move to shift the whole ball, the core underneath that crust. And recently, in the last 2 years, they've announced publicly that they've found a layer all over the planet underneath the crust, which is kind of a soft, chalky-like rock that acts like a ball bearing, and minor impacts on the skin or the crust of the Earth can cause the skin or the crust to shift greatly. And that was the backwash, and the impact of that is what destroyed Atlantis. Now, part of it is resurfaced in that the Mediterranean side of the Saudi peninsula is up 1,650 feet. So in the mountains there and along the Levant, where you have Lebanon and Israel and Syria at the above the Lebanon, they have found remains of civilizations that were more advanced, and the giants in the Bible. They were hybrids. They were chimeras that were formed in Atlantis, but they survived the flood.
Okay.
Now, I know you might think that this is denying that the whole world was killed, but it wasn't. If you read the Hebrew, the local area was inundated and mountains were sunken there and things like that. But the survivors of this Atlantean crossbreeds formed tribes like the Ephraim and the Zamzavim and the king of Bashan, which was part of the Golan Heights now and down into northern Jordan. The king of Bashan had a bed that was 18 feet long. And Goliath and his four brothers, they were big fellas, and they were the product of this crossbreeding. Now, by the fallen ones there under Poseidon, is what they call him in the Greek. The biblical records do show that at least 12, maybe 200 angels came down to earth on Mount Hermon, which is just above Damascus. And that's how they divided up the earth, and they went around, and Poseidon was just one of those over Saudi Arabia. There was the equivalent over in South America and in North America and and China. All these places had these super beings there. Look at why the Greeks built 10 super cities to worship their gods or little demigods, like Hercules and all that kind of stuff. They built these not in Greece, but in Israel, northern Israel, and over into northern Jordan. And one of the cities is, like I've visited a couple of them there, but there's one called Agades, I think it is, just south of the which sea? It's a lake, Lake Galilee, up in that area. And it is the name of that town was what Plato's document told about one of the sons of Poseidon. That was his capital, which was just below the gates of Heracles, which was up in Turkey. So all these things fit together, and there were some survivors, and that's why God told Joshua when he entered into the promised land with the tribes, go kill this little village here with all of its animals and its people, its babies, wipe them out, burn everything, kill them, because they had the giant gene, the Nephilim type gene still.
Right.
And so this was the mop up that God was having Joshua do in the promised land, get rid of all of them there. There's just so many things that come into focus once you dig into the Hebrew and put Atlantis there and how they crossbred with our Adamic man.
Stan, do you think when we talk about the Nephilim or angels or anything like that, do you think that we're talking about spiritual as in angelic beings, or are we talking extraterrestrial origins?
Well, when you say extraterrestrial, off the earth,
I'm going to say off planet, not the, you know how we always think of an angel as in angelic part of heaven or God or that.
Yeah.
And then, then you hear, of course, all that there's that maybe they were being mistaken for gods or whatever. And basically they were extraterrestrials.
Well, look at this. The Bible tells you there are at least 3 levels to existence. The upper heaven, middle heaven, lower levels. We're in about a middle level. God's in a level above us in a concentric universe. And the physics may be a bit, eye-crossing, but basically we live in the same space, but not at the same time frame as the heavens above us and the Tahom, the uttermost depths beneath us. And there are different energy levels on atoms in each of these levels. Those coming from the upper level, which some of them were cast out and came down and bred with our women, those came down when they came through the gateway, well, I'll just call it a gateway anyway, to our level. They were bright and burning because they weren't being consumed by fire, but they were so energetic, their atoms were coming from the upper levels, that it was very bright, and anything that they touched would either be electrocuted or burned until they discharged this energy. That's why Jesus told Mary in the garden after he arose, "Oh, wait, don't touch me, for I have not yet ascended," because he was being energized to go up, meet the Father, and come back for that 40 days where he met with the disciples and told them where to go. So that's off the earth in that respect, but it exists kind of parallel to us, and we don't realize it. Right. And when people speak of ghosts, which I'm sure you've discussed on your show, when these things come into a room, the room gets cooler. Why? Yes. Because they're at a lower energy level in their atoms. When they come into ours, punch in through the gateway there, they draw energy out of the room. They're like an ice cube coming into the room. And that's why, because the different levels of existence have different densities of energy on the atoms.
Right. And the reason why I asked you that is because, you always think of spiritual or angelic beings. How can you say if something can actually procreate with a human woman, you're thinking, okay, this has to be a physical being in order to be able to procreate versus what we think of as a heavenly, if it's up in the heavens, it's not corporeal. It's, that's why I asked you if, and again, that's the big question mark. Nobody really knows for sure, or it could be both. Maybe we had angelic beings, and along the way, let me ask you, what do you think as far as extraterrestrials? Do you think that they have or are among us?
Oh, definitely, but not from other planets. I think they're from a parallel dimension above us. They've been cast down because of the war in the heavens. If you read it in the Bible, there was a war in the heavens, and it's ongoing and finishing shortly. And the last battle will be fought here on the earth. And these beings from the upper levels, when they come through the gateway, what do they call that thing? The veil. They call it the veil in the Bible. When they come through the veil, they will materialize as solid here, and they will have knowledge and powers above what we've got. People will be impressed with that. I think this is the last great deception that the Bible speaks of, that Jesus mentioned, that do not be fooled by these coming saying they are, messengers of light, and, they created the Messiah, me, and all that kind of stuff. Don't be fooled by that. And this goes to the extraterrestrial alien UFO concept that we're being fed by Hollywood and books. In the Cosmic Conspiracy book I wrote in 1978 and in the last edition in 2010, I explain this great deception at the end of it. beware of the UFOs coming as your elder brothers from space and all this, happy
Mm-hmm.
times. They're going to get rid of the Illuminati. They're going to get rid of the, the rich bankers and all the bad people on the earth and all the other aliens that are little gray critters that, abduct you and hurt you and that kind of stuff. And people are going to go, oh, hey, they look like us. They're friendly.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Let's have a world government under them. And that's what's coming. Paraphrase it very quickly.
Let me ask you, do you think that they could use the supposed UFO threat also for the same the means to the end of let's all unite, because of course a lot of times we exchange security for being overly regulated. Do you think that they could turn around and use the supposed UFO threat along those lines?
Yeah, but when you say the established government,
I'm going to say as in, well, let's say, because I tell everybody, you want everybody to unite, make us all humans, as in a UFO threat, and then everybody's like, oh, where that will be the excuse, if you want to call it that, an excuse to, okay, we're going to keep you safe, but in exchange, we're going to have to implement these sets of regulations or laws or whatever you want to call them.
Well, yes and no. When you say the existing governments and things you're talking
governments,
about,
sometimes it's beyond. I don't want to say plural governments or.
All right. But if you look at all the governments of the planet, try to pick one which has a system that you trust.
I was saying nobody.
They're going to get rid of all those. The aliens,
right.
the followers are going to come. They're going to appoint their man to run their government of the earth, so that people will say, "Oh, you've gotten rid of all these people that were putting regulations on us. And all that. You've got new medicine. All we got to do is just support the new world order and
right,
get the mark, and hey, everything's fine,
and you'll be okay. Well, you'll be protected."
Right, and this is what is happening, is that the groundwork is being made for the aliens, quote unquote aliens, to come and save the earth from all of the bad dudes that are controlling the earth at the moment. And people will cheer. I mean, people that don't know any better in the Christian community will say, oh, look, we got rid of all these anti-Christian people here and anti-Jewish, and wow, great time. Did you ever see the movie V, or the series V in the 70s?
Yes, I do. Okay. I do remember
that guy. That guy put into movie format what the Book of Revelation warns against in this great deception. They were looking like humans, but they were really lizards underneath, underneath the skin. And I found so many parallels in that. I've written to Kenneth Johnson, the author, several times and not gotten a response, but he did a great work in trying to tell the Bible in a secular way what's coming.
Yeah, like a sci-fi series.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to see here shortly. We're seeing more and more reports on mainstream about UFOs, aliens.
That's a first. I mean, usually it's like
you're nuts,
and
but not now.
And yeah, I had started watching that program, the Project Blue Book, and I know it's not entirely accurate.
Yeah,
but you can see where when you're looking at it with a certain perspective, where it's leading or it's good entertainment. It's interesting. But where it's heading, what the aim of it is.
Yeah.
And it's going exactly in the direction that you just described.
Yeah. And, once you know the plot, you see it everywhere, that this deception is coming through the media, through the everything, churches even. And there are going to be a lot of churches that are fooled by this. As I say, unless you're very careful and read the scriptures, and look at current events in light of that, you're going to miss it. You're going to be fooled.
Well, I think that what happens, I hate to say it, is that many, many people don't want to see it because they're used to their comforts and how can I say structure, and don't want to be challenged. They just want to live this life, their structure. How's that?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people like that. It's unfortunate, but it is. And you can't make somebody see something or admit to seeing it if they don't say, they're willfully blind.
Here's the good news, though. They're willfully blind, and they're going to be frightened when things, happen like that. But the good news is that the Messiah, Jesus, says, if you believe in me and trust in me, then I will take care of you. And, during the tribulation period that's coming, some people will be beheaded and die for their faith, but still you will be saved into an everlasting life with him. That's the good news. And the even better news is, if you study the scriptures, this theory of the rapture is correct. There will be a time when the believing followers, no matter where they are, will all be caught up into the heavens in like that, a fraction of a second. And that's really, really good news. The good news in the long term is that if you are in this situation on the earth where you're being marked and chased and persecuted, know that God will help you in those times, whether it's in an easy death or whether it's in escaping the persecution, whatever. He's still there caring for us. And, I don't care what religion you are, basically. Yes. As long as you know God and his son, then be encouraged. That's the good news.
Right. Yeah. And I think, but like I said, there's a lot of people that it boils down, they don't want to rough it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's basically what it boils down to. They don't want to rough it. And I don't get me wrong, I'm into creature comforts. I'm not gonna say like I said, I grew up without the air conditioner, and now you take away my AC and I'm like real wimp, like, oh, it's so hot. I'm not saying like I'm out there roughing it. But if I have to, I have to. I have made plans. I do have a fallback thing, to.
Have you ever been camping and slept on a cot?
Oh God, yes, I've done.
I hurt the next morning after that.
Oh man, always. Let me tell you. So you feel, especially if you don't, even if you sometimes in a sleeping bag, you feel every little rock, every little pebble, every little thing. Yeah, yeah. It's, but
and the older you get, the worse it is. Let me tell you.
Oh my, it's like, you're like, oh, let me go get that 800 milligram ibuprofen quick.
Yep. It does work. I have a healthy stock of that now, even. So, yeah.
Yeah. I've got, but for anybody that's been alive for a while, you're looking at, if you do this historic, the movie in your head about everything, you're like, what is going on? So some people don't know any better. If you've been alive for 20 or 25 years, you don't know, how much things have really truly changed. So
unless we get help, what happens? The Christians, unless we get help, the new government is going to be so all controlling that you won't be able to have your house and stuff. You won't be able to own things. You won't be able to buy yourself. And we're hoping that we're not here for that.
No, let me tell. I tell everybody. Even though they if you see the news, you look at the businessmen as far as the restaurants and everything. It was Florida. We dodged the bullet pretty much, but still. But even the local business people here that sometimes employ a couple of people, they're hurt because they don't even have the couple of people to do like little jobs. I mean, it's not just your regular businesses that open. It's trickled down into anybody that's trying to make a living any which way.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's not just regular businesses that open their doors. It just worked its way down. And even in my community, I try to give work to local businessmen.
Yeah.
And, it's yes, we'll try to get out there, or but it might take me 3 weeks to. And it all comes back to that point of origin, which is things that have happened in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So, I see that. You have to be blind not to see it. Anyway, Stan, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It has been absolutely wonderful. We could talk about so many things, but it's been a real eye-opener. It just dovetails with what's been happening when we talked about what's going on with the sun. And I know a lot of people don't want to think about that happening, but it's a possibility.
Well, it is a possibility, and even if it doesn't fully manifest, what we're talking about in Dare to Prepare, Holly's book about preparing for emergencies of various kinds, it's important to prepare your home to weather these things, for energy, for food, water, and that kind of stuff. And the soul side of it, the spirit side, the cosmic conspiracy talks about the UFO deception and what your options are, how to prepare for that. And that's all we've done for, several decades here, is to try to warn people and help them get prepared spiritually and physically.
Exactly. And to be more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I think there's also sometimes a lack of that because we've gotten used to 911 and that's it. And within 5 minutes, And people can just forget that part. They can just kiss that goodbye. As once they start saying, well, if I do that, but that's not really an option, what am I going to do? Then they start thinking of alternatives. But if they never go down that path in their mind, what if all these things in the infrastructure supposedly of where I live at is not there available to me? Then what do I do?
It's like we're living in the Wild West, but now where you're out on the prairie, as a pioneer, and you have to get your food, you have to protect your house against the Indians and whatever else, and against the elements. That's what we're coming to.
Yeah, and the nearest fort is a day's ride away.
Yeah.
Stan, for my podcast listeners, what is your website address?
Standeyo.com, STANDEYO.com.
Yes. And as everybody knows, I will put a link to your website on the credits of the show.
Thank you.
And again, I want to thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating to speak to you.
It's been a good evening. Thank you, Marlene.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.
Wow. This has been so interesting. I have loved speaking to him because guess what? He is talking about what's going on right now for us, right this moment. And, like I've said before, a lot of the shows that I bring on when we talk about paranormal and ghosts and UFOs and cryptids, and sometimes I think of it as entertainment, as like, let's, because sometimes reality can be harsh for us. Don't get me wrong. Compared to some of the problems that people in other parts of the world face, it's like first world problems, but regardless, this is our existence. Okay, I'm talking if you live in a modern society, whatever, stressed out for a variety of reasons. And to me, the entertainment is like, sometimes it just gives you a chance to think or listen to other things besides what's going on in the news and, everything that's going on around us has affected us so much. I want to say like in the last 18 months, besides the usual stuff that we deal with living. But then it's good, to talk to somebody like Stan, because we see this very thing with the sun, the flares and everything, how this has been going on, something that's being measured. That video that I showed, that video is from NASA. NASA is the one that provides that on their website so that you can basically look at it. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can get it over there again. Let me see. Hold on. Here it is. And as you can see by the time lapse at the bottom, okay, it starts around like October 30th, and it's going through each day. And you can see even now, you can see that big flare coming up right in the middle and things like that. And these are the things that he's talking about. And I had heard about this before, but not with so much detail. As a matter of fact, I had heard more about, if somebody did something EMT wise, as far as, frying all our electronics, not from the sun, but I'm talking man-made source. Anybody that's listened to me for a while knows that I am in the eternal optimist. I am. And I believe in human beings. But at the same time, I'm going to say we owe it to ourselves to be prepared up to a certain point. And by this, I'm not an alarmist. I'm not. But I think that if anything has become apparent for anybody that's been alive for the last 18 months, is that things can change very, very rapidly and unexpectedly. My point being that and like I said, I grew up in South Florida where we had the hurricanes and you had to prepare. And, I know what it's like to live without electricity, but that was it. It was just a little part of the country, and you knew, when the hurricane, what was it? Was it Irma Maria came through and I didn't have electricity for over a week? I could go to my son's house and I took a shower there. He had electricity. In other words, I was roughing it, but not that bad. It's not the same as when you have it in your house. But now, can you imagine when there is no neighbor, no family member, nobody from other parts of the country are going to come in and bring in help or supplies or whatever. As I remember, you know, whenever we would get these hurricanes churning out in the Atlantic that looked like they were going to come to Florida, you know, I remember all the governors, whoever was the governor at that time, would tell everybody with good reason, hey, you need to have at least 72 hours worth of food and water there. Because there was a lot of people that were expecting, like, you know, because it would take that much time if it was bad enough. And like I said, I lived through Hurricane Andrew for supplies or help to arrive. Okay. And even then, you had a lot of people that were like, they were out in left field. And it's like, man, what were you thinking? Despite what you see, you know, how they show, you know, like whenever they tell something's coming to South Florida or wherever, and then you see the shelves are empty, you would think, okay, everybody's prepared. There's a lot of people that forget it. They were just thinking the government or whoever, the county, whatever, you know, whoever, the city, is going to come and take care of me. And that's not the case. That is not the case at all. As a matter of fact, I remember one time, this was when Katrina, because Katrina, you know, made a stop in South Florida before ending up in New Orleans. But when it came into Miami, it came in like as a category 1. And I remember a next door neighbor, she was renting and she was a single mom. She had 2 little kids and she had nobody. She didn't, what was it? I think the landlord had left some of the plywood in the yard, but she didn't have anybody to put it up. She was by herself. You know, as neighbors, we went over there and we, you know, my sons and everything, and we helped her, you know, so that she would have the windows covered. You know, she had some big windows in the house and things like that with an older home. And, you know, that was great. We were happy to help because that's what neighbors are for. But what I'm saying is that sometimes people they're not prepared as much as they can for what's going to happen. All right. And even now, you know, with this, you know, luckily where I'm at, yeah, you know, I've never really seen bare shells per se. I mean, right now, recently, like today, I went to buy some dog food. Guess what? There was a lot. Parts of the shelves were empty. I've never seen that before, ever. You know, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Marlene, you're reading too much. Yeah, you buy something else or whatever. It's not like there's nothing there. But I'll tell you what, before that, I bought 2 50-pound bags of dog food that, by the way, in a pinch, you can even give dog food to your chickens. I have them put away in my shed, 100 pounds worth of dog food, because I'm thinking, you know, if you're one of these, besides yourself and maybe your family, the humans, if you have pets, hello. And like I said, I've got a well that doesn't run on electricity with a hand pump. Besides having a generator with propane in it, you know, one of those automatic ones. And, you know, but believe it or not, I don't consider myself like, you know, a so-called prepper, but I have prepped. How's that? Because it's like, I don't want to, because I've lived through what that's like. And that was on a minimal inconvenience as far as like being, you know, a hurricane. But basically, once you left that area where, let's say, the electricity was down, it wasn't like it was no man's land. But I'm thinking, what if no man's land is everything? All of the U.S. or part of the U.S. And I'm seeing now, and it's like part of me, maybe like I said, before 2019, I said, you know, okay, yeah, but now anything is possible. I don't want to say, no, that's impossible, because right now, a lot of things that before I thought were impossible are possible. And yeah, I have my chickens. Obviously, everybody hears about my chickens, which I would never kill and eat, but still, I get eggs. I've planted fruit trees. We're starting right now. We're going to do some vegetables now for the fall, you know, and even though, because like I said, we've been here barely a year. So basically it's now that but all these things are things that in the back of my mind, what's the worst that can happen? that none of this comes to pass, okay, no big deal. No, nothing wrong with that. But the alternative, which would be that something or some version of it does happen, at least I've got something to feed us, help a neighbor. You know, I mean, my neighbor across the street, he hunts and he traps. We've already spoken to him. We've already negotiated. As a matter of fact, last Friday, he was going to go pig hunting, and he asked us, hey, do you guys want a pig? And I was like, John, you know, my freezer's full. You need to tell me this ahead of time, you know. But my point being that the preparedness is not only just like stocking up or making sure, hey, I've got a source of water or this or that, you know, I've stocked up on some aspirin, you know, things like that, like pain relievers. You talk to your neighbors. You know, what can we do for each other that in a squeeze will help us? You know, I know all my neighbors around here. We've all talked. We all have each other's phone numbers. I mean, this is a more rural area. But I'll tell you what, I want to use the example of Andrew. And Andrew, when people were looting and there was no electricity, and like I said, you would go out at night and all you would hear is the hum of all these generators. They were people that, let's say in some of these developments, you know, they would have people that were basically walking around the development, making sure that there were no looters. Like neighbors got together and they went and they basically assigned from the people that were still there guard duty to make sure that nothing was being looted, because some people were able to stay in their houses, others couldn't. And it was really funny because you had one house that was damaged but livable, and then right next to it, it was a house that was, for all intents and purposes, flat. It was gone. So, or that it was okay, but you couldn't live in it, and people, what little was left. My point being that part of it is, and you know, you think I'm going to go into the psych part of this. Believe it or not, even though there's a lot of people that say they don't want to pay attention to this part, they think that that's a great idea for a movie. In the back of their mind, I hate to say it because that's what I like. I'm a subconscious behaviorist. That fear is working in the back of your head, even if you're in denial that it could ever happen or get like that. And to me personally, when you've made some effort or some preparation, whatever it might be, it kind of relieves you, because in the back of your mind that you have that if this happens, if this happens. Okay, you can deny it, but it's still there. In your subconscious mind, it is. When you do some type of preparation, or you think, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If that happens, I'm going to do this. What can I do within my realm of possibility of what I can do, little by little, or whatever the case might be? Everybody's different depending on your circumstances, where you live, etc. It does something for you. Okay, it makes you feel better. Because you know, okay, I've got a plan. Because it's a plan. It might not be the best plan, but it's a plan. And by the way, it's not something that I said, okay, I can do this in a weekend. This is not the weekend project. I'm going to do my preparedness for, you know, end of the world or whatever, you know, no electricity or whatever. God, there's a multitude of things that we've been told that could happen. No, I've been doing it little by little. Hey, let's get this. Hey, let's do that. Hey, let's get some fruit trees. We've planted them. We know that was one of the first things that we did when the springtime came, because out here, you know, we have to be careful, like, again, because of, you know, when if anything drops below freezing. It was this conscious effort little by little where you do this and you do that. And like I said, it's not a weekend project, but at some point you got to start. And I could say personally, and I think a lot of people will feel this way, that you feel better knowing, you know what, because and I could say again, this is from proper experience. When something like this happens, whether the electricity is wiped out, you know, the stores are closed, things like that, the last place you want to be is on the streets. Okay, because I was there, in well, last times, even when none of your traffic lights work, none of them. All right. So you got to do that 4-way stop sign thing. There's a lot of crazy people out there, almost near access. It was like the last place you want to be is on the street. What you want is to be home and stay home and figure it out. Like I said, I was cooking breakfast for my kids on the gas barbecue outside. I was cooking for them, and this is how we got through. And that was it. And that's the way I think of it. It could be from minor inconvenience to a couple of days without electricity to something like what Stan was describing, where everything that we live with, that we don't even think about, as in flipping a switch, whether it's for electricity, for water, for temperature control. Remember, look what happened with Texas recently. It wasn't the summer, it was the winter. And I'm telling you right now, if everybody thinks about fire, you can go through wood, as in for fire, really quick. All right. And where's your source? I don't have to worry about being blanketed by snow where I'm here, but it could get cold. Really, it drops down into the 20s here. No snow, but really, really cold. Okay. All those things that we take, like, that's it. None of that. No communications. No, it's exactly like what he described. Think of yourself out in the Wild West. Let's take the romanticism out of it. Let's take away the Hollywood version of the Old West. That doesn't exist anymore. Let's look at the reality of life out there at that time. Frontier, little law, if any. Medical, something you're lucky if you had somebody that had some type of medical knowledge, like the doc. Okay, but of course, no 911, whether it's for police or for first responders, doesn't exist. Same thing with fires. It was up to the neighbors, bucket, put out the fire. Same thing. A cut that wasn't properly cleaned could kill you. Same thing with diseases of any type. Without the medicines that you could get, measles, chicken pox, all the stuff that that now we haven't feared for a long time. All those things, you would have to deal with them. You would have to deal with it for yourself and for your family. That, I hate to say it, and it's a difficult thing sometimes to think of the possibilities, because, like I said, we only get those doses of it when we go see some of these dystopian style Mad Max kind of movies where, the world's gone crazy and all these things are gone. But that's it. After the 90 minutes are over, the 2 hours are over, you get up and go, man, that was a great movie. Wow. Can you imagine? Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Unless you're living that. Unless this is your world from then on. Not for 90 minutes or 2 hours. Right? You have to think of it that way. You can hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And I know that sounds very trite and overused, but sometimes that's the way you have to look at it. Because otherwise, you kind of like are in denial. And you know what? Sometimes when we're in denial about certain things, the consequences are minor. Maybe it's like, oh, I should have thought of that. I was in denial. I really didn't think that. Okay, well, I'll know next time. Not what we're talking about here. Being in denial about this, what's going on, the consequences of being in denial are much more terrible than other stuff that you can either procrastinate about, be in denial about. The consequences of this are more severe, much more severe. And it's going to be one of those things that wishing it away, or wishing it's not, that's just not it. In other words, this is, and here we drum roll, it's going to require that we are adults, because that's what a child does. A child doesn't, wishes things away, wants to do the magical thinking thing. Either if I don't look at it, or when the kid puts the covers over them, thinking this is like the fort, the monster can't get me, nobody can get me, I'm invisible because I'm under the cover. A child thinks that way. But as an adult, perfectly well that all you've got is a sheet. Hello. So basically what it's going to require from all of us is that we are true adults in the full extent of that word, especially if we have family that depend on us, children or elderly, that depend on the decisions that we make beforehand. It's called responsibility. Yeah, the R word. It's responsibility towards yourselves, for yourselves. And I think that, how can I say, part of our technology and also just our world has allowed us to escape responsibility for ourselves, because there's always somebody to call for help. Or, I didn't know, that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, the sooner you start taking responsibility for yourself in the fullest extent, and your surroundings as much as you can. I'm not telling you, there's certain things that you have no control over. I'm not saying that, let's not get carried away here, but the better off you'll be one way or the other. Okay, whether any of this comes to pass or not, I want to say there's a part of you that grows, and by this, I don't care what age you are, that grows. And when you know that there's a certain level of self-sufficiency that you've achieved or you're prepared for, or that you're willing to confront, there's a part of you that grows, that lessens the fear. Because once you master something, or at least you're prepared to handle it, there's a part of you that fear goes away. But if you try to dodge it, that fear kind of chases you around like a puppy. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Guys, I hope you like this video with and the audio with the podcast with Stan Deyo. I went on his website. He's got so many interesting things to talk about, and I'm hoping he'll come back on the show so we could talk about them, because things are rapidly changing. And I mean, across the board in so many, many different things. And let's see what happens. I've got, again, I'm going to have a link to his website on the credits of the show. And again, I've got so many great guests coming on. I've got a lot, either like returning guests, new guests. Like I've said before, if you have any suggestions for subjects or guests that you would like me to bring on the show, please send me an email at Marlene@MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Or you can visit my webpage at marlenepardo.com. On all my websites, I have email links, by the way, if you want to send me an email. And again, I want to remind you, if you want to listen to any of the podcast versions of the show, you could go to the websites, and I have a link, because I have all these MP3 files accessible from my website without commercial interruption. I have linked to the different podcast platforms, but if you want to listen to it without interruptions, I have links to each of the shows. And you can listen to it from the browser or download the MP3 file. Any way you want to listen to it, please go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, MarlenePardo.com, or the other two series, NightShadeDiary.com or SupernaturalStorytime.com. All of those I offer for no charge, no commercial interruptions. Just go to the website and you can download them. Again, thank you so much for being part of my audience. You are all wonderful. And I will be seeing you soon, next week. Time flies when you're having fun. And of course, I always have fun with you guys. Take care.